think I'm gonna get started. Hello. This is working, right? Yeah, it's working. Nice. Hi. First of all, I'd like to thank Codemotion for having me here for like the third time. They haven't kicked me out yet, so I think it's about the Italian mafia. It's something to do with that. Anyway, hi, I'm Mattia. I just want to apologize in advance for lots of terrible stock photos. I put the worst stock photo in the first slide, so you're used to it now, and it cannot get worse than this. Anyway, I'm just gonna start with a little introduction about myself. This is not me, but if you search for my name on Google, you'll find these paintings, and they're beautiful, so I put them in. This is actually me, and this is me actually the night before I have to prepare my Codemotion presentation. But normally, actually, I just look like this. Sorry, I had to try that joke. Anyway, I used to be a Flash developer, and I made lots of puzzle platformers. I continue to make puzzle platformers later. But anyway, I started with a game called 101 Story that was an IGF finalist and basically utilized mechanics to tell a story, or at least I tried to do that. I did some work that I'm less proud to have done, but it's still nice to have it on my portfolio. And the latest game that I released on Xbox One is called Through, and I'll show you the trailer. With no audio. Can you hear the audio? No. Yeah? That's cool. Whatever, it works anyway. So it's a Kinect game. That was not a wise business decision, and basically you can use your body to change the layout of the level. So you see now he is deleting certain platforms and showing others. And the entire game is based about puzzle mechanics, but involving the body, so try to use physicality in the gameplay. All right. So I'm currently working at an Italian company called Overwatch as a lead designer on a project that we haven't announced yet. But a lot of the talk is about lessons that I've learned throughout the work I did on Through and the work I did here. Here, the company at Overwatch is quite bigger. So a lot of things changes, and a lot of this talk is not directly related to having a bigger team, but some of the lessons that I've learned about this topic, I think, mostly apply to that. But I hope it can be inspiring even if you're a two-person team anyway. So what is this talk about? This talk is about vision, as you read in that incredibly cheesy title, which is, to me, it's the same, at least for the scope of this talk, as direction, as identity, as finding like what makes your game, right? What makes it special, and what gives you the tool to take decision while you're making it. So instead of starting with something theoretical, let's start with an example, right? So we're working on a game, and it looks beautiful, and we have to decide on a control system. Let's start with two control systems. One, it's the tank control system. Probably some of you are aware of that, but it's basically you have a controller in your head, not in your head, in your hand. If you push the stick, the character will move forward. If you push the stick in any other angle, the character will turn and then move forward, right? It's a very old system utilized in games such as Resident Evil or Silent Hill. And then we have a standard control system. Standard control systems, when you pull the stick in any direction, the character immediately turns and walks in that direction, so you don't have to wait for the character to turn. Now, let's say that we have to choose between one of these two for a game, right? We test them. We don't have graphics yet. We're just using cubes. And what we find out is that the tank control system is not very responsive. It takes time. You have to wait for it to turn. And it's not very precise either. But the standard control system, on the other hand, is very responsive and it actually does the job, right? It does exactly what I ask it to do or what I expect from it to do. So I guess after testing this with cubes, we get to the conclusion that maybe the standard control system is better. Like, in general, it's an improvement, right? I think that's thinking that's dangerous to making games, like thinking that there are certain features that are better than other in general. And I think it's a culture that's born out of the type of reviews that we have for video games, right? When we assign values like 9 to graphics or 8.5 to gameplay, we always expect, okay, then there's an 8.7 and 8.3, whereas the review should be, how does the game how well does the game do what it wants to do, instead of, is it the best version of this feature? And let me try to tell you what I mean by this. Let's analyze and look at the old, ancient first Resident Evil versus not the latest, but actually the previous one, so Resident Evil 6. So Resident Evil 1 is horror. It's meant to be scary. It's meant to actually keep you at the edge of your seat. And the player is very vulnerable. That's by design. And you should never really feel like you're in control of whoever you're playing. On the other hand, Resident Evil 6 is an action title. It's actually about feeling like a badass, like you can shoot the zombies and yeah, it's fucking cool. And it's about bringing all of the characters from previous Resident Evil in this action package, right? And actually, the old Resident Evil used tank controls, and the new one uses the standard one. Now, we said the standard controls are better than tank controls, but if we look at these features again, if we want the player to feel vulnerable, to make them feel like they can never truly escape what they're facing, they can never really fully control of what's happening, actually in this case, the tank control, the slowness, then being imprecise and responsive is perfect for this type of game. So actually, in this case, it's a lot better for Resident Evil 1 and for other games of this genre to have that type of control system, which we deem worse in general, right? Or what about the saving system? In the old Resident Evil, you had to find cartridges, actually ink ribbons, and you could only save a limited amount of times. And you could only save if you found an typewriter. So what that means is basically you go a long stretches of the game without saving, and this is pretty bad considering standard game design or modern game design technically, because if you die, you lose your progress, and it's very frustrating, right? Sorta, right? Because this type of tension that you can get from actually losing physical, tangible progress is something that you cannot get from a game that auto-saves. You cannot feel this scared unless you really have something to lose. So once again, a feature that technically we are left behind, technically game design is improved, is actually better for Resident Evil 1. So what can we get from this? What can we, if we think about this, if we think of a feature that is considered generally better is actually not, I think what we can get out of this is that a better feature, it's not necessarily a better feature for the game you're making. And so we might just well just remove the better and worse and stop thinking about good features or bad feature and start thinking about my computer turning off. No. And start thinking about plugging in my power cable, I think. It's actually still on. Sorry. Here we go. And start thinking about what's a good feature for our game, not in general. This might sound obvious, but it actually isn't. Like very often, even in big studios, we're thinking about certain features and how it's good that we left them behind, right? And in this talk, I want to try to address how to think about features in a different way. So not how to think about them as, oh, this is good, oh, this is bad, this is great design, but as, is this fitting with the vision that I have for the game? Is this doing what I want the game to do, to create the emotions that I want to generate, or the feeling that I have, or the mood of the game? So this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but it also really does. It's a drummer, and he's being asked, what makes a good drummer? And PowerPoint has terrible video controls because I used to be able to skip the first part since it's a 5-minute video, which I am not right now, so I will play it from my desktop. But basically, he is playing in front of a crowd, and they ask him, what do you think distinguishes a good drummer from a bad drummer? And I'm just going to let the video play, if it does play. Or maybe I can just do this. So it's basically, the audio quality is not great. That doesn't, yeah. But basically what it's going to do is going to play a Beatles song. And it's going to play it as a bad drummer and then as a good drummer. Maybe it's going to play it now. Yes. And now as a good drummer. That was kind of cool, but not actually what the song was trying to do. Now, obviously, when we're taught about working in game design or as a musician, we're always trying to learn how to do more, right? How to invent new things or improve what's before us. But I think the biggest question when you're making a game is what actually fits best with this game. And what he says in this video, which is basically not hearable because of the quality of it, is you shouldn't play as a drummer, you should play for the song, right? You're not here to showcase your talent, you're here to actually make the song better. And in a way, I think we have to think about the features of our game and what we're putting in it as, are they contributing to a greater goal? And here we arrive at the bigger, actually, point of this talk, which is finding the vision. Vision is kind of a fancy term. We can use any of this: identity, direction, soul. Maybe soul is even worse, actually. But it's basically about how do we get that nugget that tells me, okay, this is actually what my game is. This is precisely the description of what I want to achieve, right? And what I described earlier, like, I was focusing on the controls, and I was trying to make them better, right? I was thinking, oh, I really want to, they're responsive, and it's great. But it's useless to make a little piece beautiful if it doesn't then fit into the overall goal, right? Into the overall game. So this is something that actually, in a way, AAA does better than indies, I think, and worse. And what I mean by that is that when you have a big studio, you are forced to think about these things. Like, if you're 5 people, you don't need to think about how do I establish my vision, how do I make it clear, how to communicate, because just 5 people in a room. You can just talk. Of course, you can still improve it. But if you're like 200 people, like in The Last of Us, you are forced to find a way to actually make people work following your vision. Because if a programmer is not working, understanding what he's doing, you will lose a lot more time, because a designer will have to tell him, hey, you have to redo this feature. If a designer doesn't understand it, they might make a level that's fun, but it doesn't work overall with the game. So what they did with The Last of Us, for instance, is they made a video. They made a live-action video of basically actors playing the game. They had a presentation with concept art. They had an explanation, a very short story that just said the major beats. And it wasn't important to give the detail what the game is. What's important is the feeling. Like, if I think The Last of Us, what do I think? I think gritty, survival, family, you know? It's really important to have some sort of direction. And the same can be said about the new Doom. I don't know how many of you have played the new Doom. Yeah, it was pretty great. Anyway, after years of trying to make a new chapter of Doom, following what was new and what was good, so another first-person shooter with a story, they said, you know, this is not working. Let's just find a clear, distinct focus, a direction, so that everything we do just has to answer to this. Is it part of this or is it not? And basically, it's like speed of movement, individuality of demons, distinctiveness of the weapon, overall power of the player, make me think, make me move. When I read these things, I often think, like, this is bullshit, sorry for my French. But basically, I often think, I don't need to write this down. I don't need to write these 4 key concepts. You know, I have it in my mind. And that's true, but at the same time, time passes and we forget things. Or maybe we get stuck working on something for so long that we forget why we started. So it's really important to me that now we go and analyze a little bit what really is vision, what really is identity, and what makes it, like, what components are part of it. And I think it's 3. It's theming, feeling, and aesthetics, which is a fancy word. Let's start with theme. Theme is something more abstract. It's like a word, a sentence. It describes a concept, an event, a place, anything that's really important to your work. I'm going to give you 3 examples. Thomas Was Alone is an indie game, and it's an indie game about friendship. I mean, if we look at it from the gameplay perspective, it's a puzzle platformer. There's too many puzzle platformers. But you see you have, I don't know if you can see very well, but there are several characters, and they're rectangles. And these rectangles have different shapes. And basically what this means is that certain rectangles can get into certain places and certain cannot. Or one rectangle can jump on top of another rectangle and use them as a platform. This is just a mechanic, but if you look at it as they're friends and they're helping each other out, suddenly the game takes a whole new meaning, you know? It's just a completely different thing. And the entire story that the creator of Mike Bittel added to this game is about friendship and is about relationships. And suddenly, just a platform game became something more. Or Firewatch. Firewatch, without spoiling for the people who haven't played it, it's a game about escaping from your responsibilities. It's a game about not dealing face-to-face with your problems. And the dialogue of the game and the entire pacing of it is built to make you feel guilty. I'm not going to say about what. Or The Witness. The Witness is a masterpiece, and everybody should play it, but besides that, it's a game about human discovery. And it's a game about how do we learn and how do we discover things. And basically, the creator started thinking, if I make a game in which there are no keys, but you cannot get past certain obstacles because you don't know about it yet, I'm basically making a game about people trying to figure out how the world works, which is what we do as humans. So maybe I can say something to people. And the entire game is based on having epiphanies, having, whoa, like realizing what you couldn't realize before. So it's through the power of theming that all of these mechanics, the story elements, are built together. Now, something that is extremely important when you're considering the theme of your game is to avoid talking about genres. This is a new way of thinking about games. Like, if you start thinking in themes, you don't need genres, right? If you think about the JRPG, like Final Fantasy or whatever, you would think, okay, it has random encounters because it is a JRPG. It has a certain feature because it belongs to a certain genre. But if you start thinking about themes, you can say that random encounters are a way for the player to feel powerful because they level up and their character feel better, and they have better equipment, and they kill more monsters. So you can think of it not as, oh, it's just a feature of a genre. You can think of it as it's a tool to make the player feel powerful. It's a tool to realize the vision of this game. The second part, besides theme, is feeling. So it's a feeling that the game is trying to work towards or building up. So, or maybe it's like a core part of it. So examples are like Shadow of the Colossus, where the creator really wanted to give you the feeling that there's a world that is much bigger than you, and basically you fight this humongous creature, and the world is not built to your size. Like every temple, every architecture in the game doesn't have doors that are human-sized. They're much, much bigger. These details might seem not important, but when everything you do in a game, thinking about the level, about the mechanic, an enemy, sound, is oriented towards thinking about your direction, the end result really benefits from this. Or what about a more recent example? Yes, these are mammoths flying in space. Everything. Everything is a game in which you can play as everything. Well, you can select any object, so a molecule, an elephant, an island, and you can just move as that object. And the entire game is about philosophy. And it's about thinking that we are one with the universe and the universe is one with us. There are actually voice recordings of a British philosopher inside the game that you can find. And I just find it really fascinating, and he would have never thought about leaving these recordings was it not for the theme. When he started working on this game, this wasn't necessarily his direction, but once he found that's what inspired every decision. It's also really important at the stage when you're thinking about themes or feeling that you want your game to give out, to avoid describing content, like saying, hey, I want a scene like this. That's not the purpose of this exercise. The purpose of this exercise is to find a trajectory. Like, this is what I want the game to feel when I finished it. Because if you decide on a scene, if in pre-production or whenever you want to do and think about the themes of your game, you decide on a specific scene, and that scene doesn't work, because it happens, it never works as you imagined it, then you're kind of screwed. Because if you really had in mind just that scene, you really have to find a new idea. But if you had in mind a trajectory, like I want a scene that feels like this, then if the scene you're trying to make doesn't work, it's okay. Just find a different scene that fits this category, that fits this vision, this trajectory, and this feeling. And the third point is aesthetics, which is everything that's visual, but also everything that is mood and feeling. So just a quick example, the game Dark Souls, of which I'm the biggest fan, it's a game about a world dying, a world that is not caring for you, and everything is struggling to survive. And we can see it already from the concept art. I mean, it's not very well lit in this room, but it's all covered with ash and smog and smoke, and the person walking isn't really standing upright. This concept art alone just sends you the whole feeling of the game, right? So if in pre-production you start and you decide on a theme, a feeling, and an aesthetic, or an art style, however you want to call it, all of the decisions that you will take throughout the development of the game will be inspired by these three key things. So that's it, right? It's easy. We just decide this, and then we make the game. Not really. There's a few issues that you can encounter by using this method, right? And I mainly divided them in 4 points. Also, let me be clear that everything that I'm saying here is a lie. Like, nobody knows exactly how game development works. This is my interpretation, and I've used it on a couple of games, and I think it has worked so far for me. But you are different. Your team is different. The people in your team think differently. You're inspired by different things. Maybe it's a team of 4 people, and each one of you contribute in the same way, and you don't need to do this. Maybe you're like the team of Inside, where they didn't actually sit down and said, this is the direction, but they just kept changing the game when they had new ideas. It took them 7 years, but it was a great game. So anyway, let's look at these 4 points. We have time, subjectivity, familiarity, and fear. So let's go one by one. Time. It's kind of hard to keep a steady direction and a steady vision if we keep changing. And we do. We are humans, and what I like today is not the same thing that I will like in 5 years. Obviously, this gets slower with age, but it's still a factor. So if my taste and my passion are different than when I started a project, and the project is a multi-year project, then how can I be sure I will not create a Frankenstein monster where the beginning was done by past Mattia and the end was done by me? Well, generally, the best thing to do is having a physical representation of your vision or identity, or however you want to call it. Naughty Dog always creates these boards with major points about the game. So what is Uncharted? It's action-packed and fast-paced. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and there's other points we cannot see in this picture. But still, they have this hanging in the studio. And then whenever they feel lost, whenever they don't know exactly if they're going in the right direction, they go back to the wall and they're like, are we doing this? Now, what you could tell me is, isn't it great that a game evolves with me? Like, if I do this, am I just going to keep the game steady and old to a person that I'm not anymore? Not really, because you're just following a direction. The way you do it still depends on who you are right now. The only thing that you're trying is saving the game from feeling like an incoherent mess, of different Frankenstein things cobbled together. Another problem, besides time passing, is subjectivity. So the larger the team, the harder it is to actually express how you feel. And vision is feeling and emotions and mood. I guess you can think about it in a logical way, but there's still a communication issue. There's a few, this is not something I think I can solve right now, but there's a few tips that I found that I think are quite helpful. First of all, try to sum up in one sentence what your game is about. This is Jeff Kaplan. He is the game director at Overwatch, which is one of the most successful first-person multiplayer shooter right now. And he was telling the story about how they were experimenting with game modes, so with different ways of playing the games. And they had all of these different ideas, and they spent like 6 months on this new game mode. But then they realized that they were not really focusing on what mattered to them, which was the characters of the game. All of these modes were about different abilities that were present in the map, but not the ones that they already gave their characters. So they just scrapped it entirely, and they put on the wall this big thing, this big poster, which is not in the picture because I couldn't find it, but it says, it's all about the heroes. So you're always reminded what you have to do with your game. This is more production-y, but it's something that I found extremely important. Don't tell to somebody, make this level and make it like this, or do exactly a level with this components and this happens in it, here's the brief, do it. You have to assign an objective. If you have, this depends between small studios and big studios, because most studios don't really work that way. But big studios, you have a designer and you tell him, hey, you need to work on the achievement system, please do this and this and this. Whereas what I like to do and works, I think, really well is to tell them, I need an achievement system, and I need it to feel like you're really accomplishing something in chapter 1. I'm just saying something random. And I want to use the achievement to send a message of desperation through the titles in chapter 3. Please do it. And not tell him anything more. This does 2 things. One, it fosters creativity in the studio. People will start having spaces to be creative while still having a brief. And 2, you don't have to micromanage, which is the worst thing you can do. Of course, if the vision in your team is held by one person, this one person will have to review the work that people are doing. But this doesn't mean telling them what they did wrong. It means telling them why the thing they have done has not reached the vision. So, for instance, let's say that I'm working on a motorbike system. And I want the motorbike system to be guided, but not too much. I want the player to feel like they have freedom. I give the task to a designer or a programmer or whoever, and they come back to me, and the motorbike turns too fast. So it's not guided enough, and the player can exit through the bushes and leave the level, for instance. I think I found that it's a lot better not to tell them, this is the problem, fix this, but to tell them, I think it would be better if it was a little bit more guided, like more general, more about, again, coming back to what was your vision on that task. You might have realized this is not the big vision. Of course, there's subvisions. Like, if you have an identity for your project, then every system and every feature of your game will have its own, which is related to the main one. But anyway, never tell somebody, I think, what's wrong. Just tell them how it should feel. Another couple tips is finding the best way to have documentation for the team. Again, this is not really needed with small team, but with big team, it becomes really important. I don't recommend using GDD, game design documents. I don't think anybody reads them, and they're completely useless. I would recommend using like a single doc for each feature, but really, it's just about experiment. I guess the bigger point here is find what works for you, because what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you, because it's about people, and people are different. And the last 2 points for how the vision can be lost is familiarity. If you play the game too often, you will become blind to it, which is also in the title. But anyway, it's really, really hard. This is less problematic with games that are about fun. So if it's just mechanical enjoyment, then it's okay. But you become so good that you cannot feel the difficulty. So you make levels that are super hard, and then people play it, and it's insane. But with narrative games, it's a lot worse, in my opinion, in my experience. Because imagine you have to make a game in which there's a big reveal, and when you discover that, you feel super sad. I've seen this big reveal 200,000 times. You know, I'm not sad anymore. So what can we do about this? You need to know if your game is still going the right direction. Playtest. This is an obvious one, of course, but it's so important. Like, don't trust your feelings on the game if you have been seeing it for so long. Take a break if you don't want to trust whoever's playing it. That's also super important. But really, get people to play your game as soon as possible. It doesn't matter if your prototype is horrible. Just get information on how it's doing. And the very last point, and also the most guru, not really logical one, is fear. So the fear that whatever you're doing is not going to work. I mean, we all have it. I mean, maybe some don't. I do. And we're all scared that what we're doing will not be enjoyed or understood. I mean, playtesting helps with that because you see people actually playing it. But there's 2 main points that I want to bring. One is stick to your strength. So don't be scared of what your game doesn't have. Be proud of what it does have. So this is Gone Home. Gone Home is hated by a lot of people, but it was a commercial success, and it's loved by a lot more. Gone Home is a game in which you go back to a house, the house is deserted, like your family has left, you don't know what happened, and you just walk through the house and discover what happened through audio logs, like audio messages, and whatever's left. Like there's a newspaper on the ground, they left it in a hurry, that's a little bit more of the story. There is no traditional gameplay, there is no fun, jump, challenge, but it doesn't matter, because the game believes in it and just made the story so good, I mean, according to some people, that worked. So you think your game maybe doesn't have replayability. Oh my God, you can only play it once and then it's boring. Yeah, who cares, you know? Just be proud of that. Just say it. Yeah, the game is meant to be played once. This thing is extremely important, for a stronger Metacritic, to be clear with your messaging. When you're doing marketing, if you try to cover your weaknesses, you will fail. You just have to state them as strength. And the last point is that if you're making something new, it will happen that you're creating the dark, and this sounds like a very obvious thing, like what does it mean? What I mean by this is when you work on something that is traditional, you know exactly how to do it. If I were to make another puzzle platformer, God, I hope not, I would know exactly how to design mechanics and what makes it fun and how to make it challenging, and how to combine them to create dynamics and blah, 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 blah. But the game I'm making now, which I cannot tell you about, it's completely out of my expertise. Like, it's something that I haven't done before, you know? So when I have to take a certain decision, maybe, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to express a certain feeling. But that is okay. That is part of experimentation. Like, when you feel that what you're trying to achieve is something you don't know, I think that's the moment that you're truly trying to do something new with the game you're creating. And if you really follow a vision, and you create a vision with the 3 points, you don't have to use them, but with the 3 points that I mentioned, which are theme, feeling, and aesthetics, it's really hard. You will end up making a game that somebody has already done, because you will think about it so much that you will not be making a clone. So you will be feeling this. You will be feeling like it's hard and you don't know exactly how to do it, but that's part of the process, and everybody does it, from the most junior designer to the most creative director. So in conclusion, some of this might have sounded obvious to you, some of this might have not, but I find it's always very helpful to hear like how somebody has thought about a certain argument and then replicate it from me. I don't think any postmortem works. Like hearing what people have done, you cannot just take it and replicate it. Every situation is different. But I hope that I have inspired a little something in you. So one, figure out what your game is about. This is so important, and you have to do it so early. Two, have a physical memory, memento, that sounded cooler, of what it is, of the vision, of the direction, of the identity. Take any decision you take with that vision in mind. Of course, you don't have to carry with you the piece of paper where you wrote the direction and just look at it every time, but go back to it. Don't go back to it daily, but go back to it monthly. Take breaks, look at it, think, am I doing what I was trying to do? Is this game the feeling that I wanted to achieve? Because you will get lost in Steam integration, achievements, production, marketing, boring things that will remove you from your game, and you will start to not feel really like you know exactly why you're doing it. Look back at that. Or do nothing of what I just said. As I already mentioned, the people at Playdead in Denmark have done this amazing game called Inside, and they basically just had an idea, started making the game, and then they were like, hey, whoever wants to change the level, that's cool. So basically, they would come at work and find their level completely changed by somebody else, with no real following a main vision. And the game is amazing, so maybe what I just said is completely wrong. But hey, I think there's something to be learned from trying to think about your vision more consciously, not just let it be your feelings, and try to keep it out, take it out as a physical thing. Thank you. So I completely forgot to put my Twitter handle here, but my name is Mattia Traverso. You have it on the schedule, and if you want to follow me, that's kind of cool. If you don't, that's also fine. If you have any question, we have like 5 minutes or something. Or otherwise, you can always talk to me afterwards.
What do you think about a game having multiple, sort of like a meta game or something? Would that have a different vision? Would that be?
Like, what do you mean exactly with meta game?
Like, for example, you've got a lot of games that players like to speedrun or whatever.
Right.
They probably have a very different vision than.
Sure. Honestly, like making video games are so interactive, and players can take them as many ways as they want, that you cannot predict exactly how somebody will feel playing your game. Like when you're thinking about the vision, honestly, it's not really a tool to force a player to feel what you want them to feel, but to take decisions throughout development that are consistent. Like it's possible that somebody will play Dark Souls, which is meant to feel like a dying, hopeless world, and we'll just have a lot of fun trolling people on the internet, lol. But, you know, at least the person who made Dark Souls, every decision they took was inspired by one thing. So, yeah, I think definitely a game that can be played like that doesn't follow the vision, but that's normal. The vision is just for the creator, it's not for the people, for the person playing the game.
So how can you how can you create your vision into something which actually becomes appealing in the end? What is like
appealing?
Yeah, something. The game has
That's
to be
a good
appealing.
point.
It's like a feeling. It's more. Maybe it's a combination of all those things. But are there stuff extra you can focus
I mean, obviously, making a game requires way more than just finding what it is. There's a lot of talent involved, of course, in design, programming, art, and whatever. What I can tell you is that I think a good topic is that if you always follow the vision, you might end up making a game that's not fun. That's something people bring sometimes. And to that, I say that's fine. You know, like I think video games like What Remains of Edith Finch or Dear Esther or even The Witness in its own way have proven that you don't need to make a classically fun game as long as it's interesting. So I think that the key word always for whatever you're making is interesting. Does this have anything that tells you something at all? If it doesn't and it's just another game, maybe you'll make your money, but you're not really using this tool. So I honestly believe that if you follow your vision, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't translate into a classically fun game, as long as the game is true to itself. If you search any game review or movie review more, but also in the game one, you will often read, this is a game that it knows what it wants to do. when they're saying this, they follow this. Like, they really follow this decision. But I cannot guarantee. Maybe you'll use this and the game will be terrible. Who knows? But all right. Thank you.